Okay, welcome to this month's Power Board. Let me just pull up. We have Andy and Mark online.
Yep.
So welcome, guys. Thanks for attending. So did everybody get the agenda?
Yes.
Everyone have a
Yes.
chance to look? Are there any questions, comments, concerns?
None here.
Okay, then a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the agenda for the Tuesday, May 5th, or Tuesday, May 7th Power Board meeting.
And I'll
I'll
second.
second that. Oh,
Was
go
that-
ahead, Mark.
Was that Mark? Mark seconded. Dick did the first. So Andy, do you want to start us on a vote?
Yes, Palmer, aye.
Mark,
Hauser, aye.
Dick,
Saunders, aye.
and Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll try to keep you guys' voices straight on who seconds and motions and stuff. So next item, on number 2 item, is the approval of the minutes. Everyone get a chance to look at those and look through. Any comments or questions on those?
No.
None?
And
Okay,
that's it.
for a motion then.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes from the 4-2 meeting.
I will second that motion, Palmer.
And that was Andy. So Andy did the second and Dick did the motion. Mark, would you start us on a vote?
Hauser, aye.
Andy?
Palmer, aye.
And Dick?
Saunders, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you. All right, item number 3 is new business. We're going to go through a 2024 draft capital facilities plan. Turn the time over to Rick. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if I can get computer up and going. So this we periodically do, typically 3 to 4 years range. And the facilities plan serves as kind of a roadmap for improvements needed for the main target areas for 5 years, but they do kind of a 10-year look as well. I gave you the abridged version without all of the load flow runs, so only 47 pages. If you need more, I can give you more. So, but the purpose tonight is just mainly to introduce it. You can read it at your leisure or when you need to go to sleep at night, whatever you want. And then next month, I think we'd look to, just a recommendation that the plan move forward to the city council. And this will also serves as the foundation for, they call it the impact fee facilities plan, which that'll be the next step after this, is to take the information from this plan, create the impact fee facilities plan, and then from that, we'll update the impact fees for the utility. So, and as you'll see, and we'll talk a little bit about, because of the previous plan was done, I think 2020. So between that time frame, we've seen pretty extensive construction costs increases. And so I would fully expect that the impact fees will go up to reflect those increased costs. So,
Rick, is that why I was curious on some of the numbers they came up with? Like you said, you look at the growth projection and it seems like we leveled out and then all of a sudden they're taking the projection way high again.
and we'll get to that and we can look at that graph, and we're so highly dependent on temperature that it makes it a real challenge try to predict that. And so over the next 10 years, we estimate that the system could grow as around 32 megawatts. Right now, we're about 55. So that's about, what's that? About a 60% increase, somewhere around there. And about 15 in the next 5 years and about 17 in the following after that is what they've done. And they modeled the system in a computer model that actually, the computer models are pretty accurate. Of course, you got to have good data in. But we give them data on each circuit and the loads on those circuits. And then they model it under different conditions, under normal conditions, or if we lose, say, a substation transformer, how do we back up the load from the others? Because if we were to lose a transformer today, a replacement would probably be 2 years out. So we have to be able to survive pretty substantial period of time right now, depending on what the loads are at the factories. We do have the old Staley transformer that's not energized that we keep up at Parkway that would be kind of our initial backup. If we had to put it into service, we could. So it's an old, rickety old transformer, but we could use it if needs be. So they look at the load history, and we'll look at those graphs and then come up with a load forecast, and we'll talk about the methods that they used on that. And it's more than just adding a percentage. I mean, they translate it back to an equivalent percentage, but it's actually based on the information that we have. The rooftop solar paragraph's new, and we had one of the solar companies kind of squawk that we weren't recognizing the benefits of solar, and the reality is there's not a significant amount as far as how we plan the system locally, because as everybody knows, 10 o'clock at night, the sun's down and our load is 90% or a little bit more than 90% of what it was at 6 o'clock. So there's not a dramatic change, and the data that's used in these studies already has that factored in as far as peak. That's already just by nature backed out of the loads of the system. So here's the table going clear back to 1987 when the city bought the system with a summer peak of 3.6 megawatts. So we've changed a little bit since those days. And last year our peak was about 52 and a half. And I think this is what some of the things Mike was looking at. You know, we had a 5-year or a 5%, 13. We actually went down in 22 and then back up a little in 2023. And so that kind of, you know, shows here with, you see these significant changes and then here. And if you go back and I go back to the post-peak reports that we presented, the last 2 summers have actually been pretty darn mild. So I'm nervous or waiting for when we have that long stretch of 113 to 15. I could see us approaching 60 really fast if we had an extended, really hot streak. And that's where the challenge that you don't really see in this, because we've added several hundred meters since this peak in here, you know, 2 years ago. So once that, and you can watch it, day 1, people are okay. Day 2, the load will come up, even though the temperature might be the same, but if you get in days 4, 5, and 6, the load goes way up. I think people at that point go, I don't care.
Yeah, their tolerance.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of human behavior in here. And so this is the projection that they have. And like I say, it looks pretty steep, but if you look at it clear back to, this goes to 91, you know, it's not really that far-fetched. You know, you could put a quasi-linear line on that without too much effort. And so what they do, well, let me try to blow this up. And again, this is circuit by circuit, transformer, and over since 2022, and then out in the projections. And the colors, yellow, you're starting to get over where you know, we need to be watching at 80% load. The transformers in our substation, they actually have 3 ratings: no fans, first stage of fan, and two stages of fans. And so when it's yellow, you're at 80% of that base rating with no fans. Orange, we're starting to utilize the fans, and red, we're above the rating of where we want to be. So that tells us we need to do something at that point, and this is showing, you know, 2029 timeframe for that. And then this is the same basic chart, same methodology, but the difference there is now we've added the Grapevine substation in. And I think we're showing that somewhere around 2025, 2026, in that range. And you can see the reds go away. There's still areas that get loaded a bit, but again, those are intended that we just watch those and make sure we're okay. And so we went through all the different, this is the one I'm looking for, all the different kind of known developments and those kind of things that are going, and came up with the number of units for each of those developments, and used an average load for those units. Here, 5 kW per unit is pretty typical. It's pretty easy. You can back that out real fast with 55 megawatts for roughly 11,000 meters. So it's pretty close to the 5. And so they go through all this. And so it's not just by a certain percentage, it's by actual development and what we think that may look like. And again, it's purely a guess, an estimate.
30,000 in the next 8 years additional?
Well, that's 32 megawatts. Yeah, so that's about,
Oh, okay,
no,
okay, that's megawatts per kilowatts.
no, it's not quite that bad, but there's still a lot of homes.
Yeah.
I mean, how many are in
Salente.
Salente? Yeah, so, and that's our biggest single area of development is Salente. You got the Turner, Turf Farm area is another big acreage, and then the Grapevine.
And the hotels that are going in.
Yeah. And so they get blended in here, and, you know, different types of homes, and we use the best information available. Again, it is a prediction, and that's why we keep an eye on it, you know, locally, how are we doing? And then if we're getting out of whack too far, we'd say, okay, let's update this study maybe a little quicker than we normally would. And so they do that by, so it still are showing, you know, hospitals, something's gonna go on that site, and roughly put it by year of when those may come in. And so that's how they develop the future loads. Then they put those loads on the existing system, and then it starts to identify those problem areas. Got that a little too big. And so what they do at that point, identify different projects to address. Some of these are existing issues. For example, we've got some of the older mobile home parks that could use some upgrades or improvements. We did the Kings Row a couple years ago, the first phase. And so we're aware of those. And so they have these different projects that, depending on where they're at and if it's wholly within the development, like the main feeder there would be by the developers. So we don't have to include that in the impact fee. Like this new Circuit 108 would take it from the new Grapevine sub basically to the boundary of Salente. And so there are some costs that we get it to those major load centers. So like the new Grapevine sub, our current estimate's about 6.2 million, which is at least double what Staley was when we rebuilt that. Pricing, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We've got bids on some of those major components. So that's the single biggest project, and that's going to be spread over probably about a 3-year period. It's currently, we'll have some pictures, the grading's done for the most part. They're working on the block wall as we speak. And then we'll order some of the major materials. And so it's going to be stretched out a little longer than we probably typically would. One, because we can't get materials really efficiently right now. And two, to help soften the budget.
Yeah, when I was looking at it, it seemed to me that the recommendations are that Grapevine is pretty essential that it gets done. Yet it looks like Grapevine's gonna take longer than, looks like you're gonna be in some of your yellow areas before you.
Correct. And that's, and again, as long as we're aware of that, that's fine. Because that's just telling you you're getting up towards the upper limit of where you want to operate normally. And so that's why we're starting to order some of those long lead time items currently. And then the other two big projects that go with that is the two transmission segments, this 1.7 million and basically 900,000. One goes along, the 1.7 is extending along the Parkway from the current from Main Street back to exit 13. And then the 900,000 goes from where the line crosses the freeway across from the Southern Utah RV Park and then back along the freeway, and they'll meet at the Grapevine sub. So those are the biggest one and the circuits that leave that to get to those load centers are the single biggest area. But again, Salente, that medical area are by far the largest areas, and then Grapevine across the freeway is another big load center. We've already got conduit across the freeway in anticipation of that, so we're working towards that. So the Grapevine sub will serve pretty much all the empty land we've got now, with probably the exception of Turner, and it actually even ties into that area. So, and again, I don't know if you have any specific questions. Again, the intent tonight was just to kind of introduce it, and then you can maybe ask more specific questions. We do have in here, before too long, we do probably need to rebuild the well lines, particularly the west one. It's older. It goes up into the habitat. There's not tons of load up there, but it's obviously critical that we have water for the city, and the only load up there is for city wells up in the habitat. So, any questions on that, or the general approach or philosophy?
No, it all seems like it's absolutely necessary. It's kind of shocking when you look at it and say, oh,
It's a lot of money.
they're gonna go out, it looks like in the next 8 years, gonna have to come up with $13 million based on
Today's dollars.
your best guess of what the dollars are gonna
And
be.
these are all $24. So they aren't inflated for the future year ones. These are all based in $24.
So
Could be more.
currently in our funds, we have adequate to start.
Yes. In fact, I think for the upcoming budget, I want to say it's about 1.7 million towards the Grapevine and about $1 million towards the transmission segments. And that'll, again, the main target on those is ordering the major equipment, the steel poles and those kind of things.
Do our vendors typically require that we pay upfront? You know, when you got a 2-year lead up time?
It didn't used to be that way, but the bids we just got back on the transformer, I think we have to pay 40% upfront when we place the PO. And then they also have lovely clauses in there that they base what the metals, you know, steel, copper, what it is now. If it inflates more than this, then they reserve the right to give you a new bill.
So,
But unfortunately, there's just not a lot of, that's just the way the current environment is.
so Rick, so this report, this isn't like the final build out St. George or Washington is full. Okay, so if we're thinking along those lines, so our current infrastructure, the substations we have, does that cover everything, or do we need more substations within town, within the area, within the,
If we grow as planned or not grow?
yeah? Grow is available. I mean, we've got public area that's not got a plan, but there's gonna be X number of homes in 20 years. Will the current substation cover that area, or do we need to get another sub? I guess, do we need to be looking at making sure that as we build out, that we're also building future in? Also,
Yes. Yes, and Grapevine will go a long ways towards that. The Grapevine site, the Parkway site.
because we built the extra pads.
And the
So we
Stately
just have
site
to-
have the option, we could add transformers to those. Bain Street, they're our smallest transformers and they're our oldest as well. So we could change those out for larger transformers as well. So as far as actual sites, once we get Grapevine in, I don't foresee a big need for a new site. That doesn't mean there won't have to be improvements or additions to those sites, if that makes sense.
Do we have other sites that are kind of blocked out for us for those purposes?
Not at this time.
Like Grapevine, we've had kind of planned, but we knew where we wanted it to have there. So when they started doing things, we said, hey, let's make sure we put this in. Do we have other sites like that scheduled or thought through for the rest of
At
town?
this point in time, I really don't think we're going to need it.
Okay.
Like I say, we can expand those 4 sites and add basically double their capacity in each one of those. But the study does, if you look, it covers virtually all the vacant land that we have available.
And it covers the transmission lines, which are the big expense
Yeah.
to get it to the substation.
Yes, north of the river, of
Yeah.
course. South
Yeah.
of the river, that's
Dixie.
Yeah.
That's Dixie, and we don't have.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just it. I mean, we're locked in. We're locked in. Everybody, so, I mean, do we cover all of that, or we have to just add a little bit on maybe because of density is a little bit higher than we planned or stuff? So it sounds like we're pretty well there.
Right. That would be the current plan. If we're hitting those, the next step would be to add a second transformer in some of those.
Is it
locations.
possible, thinking that growth, like at Grapevine and what's our north one right there by?
Parkway?
Parkway. So Parkway has 3 bays, right?
It has 2.
It has 2. So could a third bay be added on to that
We don't
location?
have enough land for that.
Okay,
And again, at that point, you can do things like putting bigger transformers and those kind of things.
Okay.
But I think for the 10, 15-year range, those sites will be adequate.
Okay.
Now, I guess it depends, potentially, things like, if EVs were adopted amongst 80% of the population, then might have to have a different discussion at that point, but short of some of those unusual or not current trends.
Okay.
So the next section, what they do, the load flow is where they model the system. What to do? They go through and basically say, okay, if we lose Main Street T1 transformer, what can you do? How do you back it up? And so they look at those major, basically the transformer loss or a feeder out of the substation loss, can everything be backed up? And yes, and this is at peak load times, which is the worst case scenario. And so if we do follow the plan, we should be able to back up all those loads, even with the loss of one of the major components. So, and we referred to that as planning for N-1. The -1 is your worst case scenario. You lose it, can you still serve the load? And so that's what the next sections are. There's one on 2022, basically current loading levels. And then there's one 5 years out, 2027. Of course, it makes the assumption that the improvements that they identified to happen by them are in place, and then they do the same thing. And then they even did a set of 2032 cases. And again, the further out you go, the less accurate it is. And but it's based on the best information available. So, and again, we'll periodically, probably in the 3 to 4 year range,
Do this again.
So we're not getting too far off. Or if we, for some reason, we go to 65 megawatts this summer, we may have to have a whole nother discussion with them and say, hey, we missed something here, let's relook at it. So I don't anticipate that happening, but it's not something that we set on the shelf. And then it's also used for budgeting, spreadsheet, and so the council understands what's coming up as well. This is just more data and information. So I think that's the main stuff that I wanted to cover. And then this map just kind of identifies the general area of each of those major projects. Again, the Grapevine, the transmission lines that connect to it are by far the largest expenditures and needs. And it only makes sense. That's kind of sitting, I can't say in the center, but it's on the outskirts of all those empty areas that we have. The Salente, the medical area, and then the Grapevine area on the other side of the freeway. So again, read it. You can ask questions now or send me an email or whatever. But that's, again, our roadmap, where we start from for budgeting, planning. You see the different projects. They don't necessarily always hit exactly at the year shown, depending on funding and different things that come up. So, again, that's the work plan, or facilities plan, and then again, the next steps, that leads into the impact fee facility plan, which leads into the impact fee study. And I've got the proposal for that. And then these guys are working on the next step as well, so.
I think like Dick said, looking at some of the numbers and dates and stuff, it was a little scary to look at first, and
It's gonna be here like,
so, yeah.
Yep.
Any questions, Rick? Rick or Mark?
Andy or Mark.
No questions here.
There'll be a test next month, so
Oh, grand.
just kidding.
Yeah, no questions here either. It's a lot of info to digest right there.
Yeah, so, you know, read through it and hopefully it makes sense. I mean, it is written by engineers, so you gotta take that into account. Give me a call for questions, so I'll try to interpret. But that's the general idea.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Rick. All right, next item of business is regular business, number 4, operations report and generation update.
Okay, it's been a good month. You've probably seen the crews out on Telegraph. One of the things that happened this last month, each year we have our annual contractor training class where the pre-approved contractors that we allow to do work for developers on the system, they come in, we go through our standards, what's expected of them, and it's an effort to make sure the installations they do on behalf of the city are, you know, they build them and then basically move on.
Looks like you need a bigger room.
Yeah, and I can't remember.
70?
I think,
In that little room back here? Holy smoke.
no, it's the one by my office.
Oh, the one, oh, okay, the one that where,
So we had like, what was it, 15 to 20 people that hadn't RSVP'd show up. So it was a little tight in there.
Next time you just choose a bay down in the warehouse and.
Well, that was
set up
actually
chairs.
gonna be the plan, but we thought, oh, we could fit everybody in, and then they kept coming. and So anyway, so that was,
Well, good. That's a good turnout. I mean, it's. a good-
well, if they don't show up, they can't do the work, so there is some motivation, so. And then along with that, most of the are refreshers, but for the new ones, we make them terminate an elbow. And I don't know if you look in here, you can spot some of our crew, watching them and working with them, so. And
Do we have that information getting out to the public? That they receive this kind of training and stuff?
probably not, no.
I wonder if we can get that out to them and stuff.
And,
These are all contractors too, right?
yeah, and.
That are now approved to work in our area? I mean, I just wonder if that would be a nice little touch for
On our
us
high
to-
voltage system, yes.
To be able to say, here's the ones that attended our training and are now approved to do work.
It is on the website. We have
Is it? Okay,
the
good,
pre-approved website on there, so. And again, that's for our system. It doesn't address any of the low voltage on the other side of the meters, so.
so is this a once a year event?
Yep. And they actually have a little card that says we passed, and they give them a written test. And they've, a card that they need to have someone on site with one of those cards. So if something's not right, we say, you know, you attended the class, you said you understand our standards. So we're unique. We do it this way. St. George does it very similarly. Some of the other utilities will have contractors do the conduit work, but their crews do the cable work. If we were to take that model on, we'd probably have to have at least another couple crews. And so it works out well, I think, for both sides, if you will. So anyway, so that was good. It was primarily Chad and Tyler and Rachel that put that together, and it went really well. Had good comments, you know, from the contractors attending, other than we had more people than anticipated. So the room got a bit stuffy as well, so, but we survived. Our April peak was about 24.3 megawatts, which was very similar to April the last couple of years. Again, we've had growth, but the temperatures where people really weren't cooling or heating, just open your windows and enjoyed it, which is nice. Probably all seen the Exit 11 work. Our part of that is pretty well done, other than support here and there. They found the city fiber conduits again this last week.
Oh, no.
I think we got a plan. They didn't hit them this time, so that was good. And I think we came up with a plan. They keep getting moved and it's interesting. So as far as generation, coming next month, we'll plan on starting to run in June. And they finished the last 2 oil changes today. And so the generators should be ready to go. They've worked on all the catalysts. We've sent those off and had those cleaned. The oil's changed, filters changed, the swamp coolers are refurbished. And those of you that remember swamp coolers, how much fun those are. We got 8 of them that are quite large, and so it's quite a project to get them cleaned up for the next year. As I mentioned, the Grapevine sub, believe it or not, up there by exit 13, there's a lot of water. Greg left. He's in the, Alliance did the design of it, and so we found more water. We knew there would be water there, but it's everywhere up there.
That's spring water coming up?
Yeah. So we had to do, we had some French drains planned, but we've had to expand how much we put in. This was a basement hole, and say it gets to a nice level and just sits there.
Well, it's amazing because that sits so much higher than where the freeway is. You would have thought that.
You would think, but yeah, it's definitely.
Wow.
And so they've put pretty extensive drain system. These are the 12 conduits. It's the start of it that will go down the entrance road. Again, more water. And where it's all gonna be taken to. So I'm hoping it works as well as the one in Staley. The one in Staley works great and just keeps running 24/7. And so I'm expecting this one will do the same. So that's after they got all that in. The sub will set in this area here. And that's just different views of exciting flat land for a substation. And then up here is where if you see this post here, if you can barely make it out, that's where the restroom for the trailhead will be. And so they'll be parking up here, parking along the entrance road, and then down below, they actually will have an equestrian parking lot area. So it's quite the combined site.
Now, the future transmission lines that are gonna come in, are they, that last picture, is that
Let's see if I can find one.
coming through the reserve there? Is that?
No, they'll actually come up this way. So they'll come up from the freeway and the parkway.
Oh, okay,
Pardon?
that was those,
Yeah, they'll be overhead. They'll be, the 69 will be overhead. All the distribution will be underground. So it'll look just like the line along the parkway. They'll be configured very similar to that. So they'll come up from the west and then be on the east side of the sub is where it comes in. So this was Thursday or Friday of last week. They've started the footings for the block wall. And this was the east side and the south side, I'm gonna call it. And this was the west side that they were still working on the prep. So I haven't been up there this week. I suspect everything looks at least by this, and they may have already started setting block. I'm not sure. I did mention tomorrow night I'll take the transformer bid, the 69 kV breaker bid, the regulator bids, and the recloser bids to council for award. Compared to Staley, same equipment, all but the regulators are identical, and they're generally 2 to 2.5 times what we paid 4 years ago. In the regulators case, if we were to use the same brand, which would probably be my preference, it was over 4 times. So, wow. There is another supplier that has good equipment. That was about half of what they were, so we're going that route on that. But so again, the costs are pretty dramatic, change much more than you'd expect in a 3 or 4 year period. And the lead times, the transformer's about 60 weeks actually, which is pretty good. Some of the suppliers were over 2 years. So, and again, the transformer, the circuit breaker, and the reclosers are all the same brand, basically the same model that we have at virtually all of our other substations, other than a couple minor differences. So. And then we'll move on to the rest of the materials, relay panels, battery system, all those kind of things. We'll start collecting the pieces, if you will. And even if the lead times right now, I'm pretty jaded. You know, if they tell me a year, it's not going to surprise me if it's 18 months, something like that. I mean, they don't meet their quoted delivery times very often right now, any manufacturer for anything, so. No, because you're a year into it by the time they tell you, oh, by the way, you're going to be late. And it's not like you can't get in the back of somebody else's line and start it all over. So, yeah, it's frustrating. On the AMI, to be frank, it's the agreement side of it's moving slower than I'd hoped. But we did have a meeting with them last week, went over my comments. They're supposed to have the new and improved version by the end of the month, and then hopefully they'll address those concerns. We'll have Thad, city attorney, look at it, and then hopefully we can get that signed, hopefully by the end of June. So realistically, with that kind of time frame, to get the data collection units here and installed, the FCC license, the system set up, and by the time the meters get here, I would suspect we won't see meters until about the first of the year is kind of what it's looking like. So it's probably, I don't know, 3 or so months slower than what I'd hoped, but we're working with it. Jessica was able to go to some training in Atlanta last month with the new system, and felt like it was very beneficial to give her a little bit of a jump start on learning how to program the new meters when we get them and those kind of things. So you probably saw the crews working on Telegraph. They completed the conductor replacement from just a little west of the Turner Farm west side up to 1100. Unfortunately, I wasn't smart enough to get pictures on that section. But then this is a picture of, they were replacing the pole. I'm standing just a little bit east of 300 East, looking down Telegraph. And so this just shows the crews setting the pole in there. And you don't realize how crooked the old poles are until you get the new one set next to it.
Yeah, laying on the concrete, it's like a snake.
There's 4 poles in there that had these extensions. Oops. That I've never liked. It's just like a C-channel that they bolt to the top of the pole. And so we'll be getting rid of those. And I don't think that we'll probably get to replacing the section of conductor from 300 East to where they ended the east side, just because I don't want to have the system chopped up when loads start to come up. So they'll have the poles replaced, as much prep as they can, and we'll probably do that actual conductor replacement in the fall. So this is the major stuff, and they'll be setting the remaining 2 poles. I think they're scheduled Monday and Tuesday of next week. to set those poles, so. And that was just the next pole up the line. So don't yell at them when they have the traffic control up down to one lane for a while, so. But you gotta do what you gotta do. They were actually able to do the other end. Turners were very nice to let us work from their property. So the only time we had to have a lane closure there is when they actually pulled the wire in, so.
Yeah, it's crazy on Telegraph now,
Yeah.
how just a little interruption
It is.
causes such a boondoggle.
And so we're sensitive to that and try to do our best to, minimize it, but at the same time, we still have to,
You gotta do what you gotta do.
we can't fit on the sidewalk and make it happen, so. They replaced like 3 transformers for different reasons today, leaks and things like that. Those keep going, just normal maintenance. We actually had 15 solar applications in April. That's pretty high for mid-year. That's more of a end-of-year number, so.
They had a blitz in all the areas, yeah.
Yeah, and I can see it from the applications. You get a cluster from one company in this area and then this area and stuff, so it's fine, we work through it. We did have a meeting with Lumen on the pole attachments, sent them the new agreement. They haven't responded back yet. They have submitted plans for a whole bunch of underground installations in the older part of town. And Chad's been working through reviewing those. There might be some opportunities while they're digging it that we may put in some conduit for future improvements. Look for opportunities that we could take advantage of there. So he's working through that. On the good news note of things, I think I showed these charts last month. It's a lot easier to show them when they're going the right direction. Our wholesale costs last month, was up just slightly from the previous month, about 7.7 cents. But what that does, we were less than the previous March. So our PCA continues on a little downward trend. It's about 3/4 cent right now. And if you look at the history, of course, we had the jump when we put the 3 cents into the rate. But last May, when we started the new one, it was at 2.5 cents. And so we're down to 3/4. So that's been a positive. And wholesale power prices these last few months have been crazy low, almost as crazy low as it was crazy high a year or two ago. So, and the peak again, we're sitting right in the middle. It's this purple, if you can see, just kind of in a pretty typical normal. And our average usage, basically taking all the residential kilowatt hours, dividing it by the number of residential, is actually down slightly. I don't know if that's LED lights, conservation, or just favorable temperatures. Is maybe a combination of all of the above. See what else I haven't covered. I forgot to get a picture of it. We had the street light up by Highland got wiped out. So
Highland and Telegraph?
yeah, they almost went off the cliff on the other side. It's on the south side of Telegraph.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the pole's
I think
back
I
up
did
and
see a truck up there.
yeah, they repaired it Monday. Today's Tuesday, so I guess it was yesterday. So it's back up, but yeah,
Wasn't me.
no, it wasn't you. Just wiped it out.
I'll take credit for the lower usage because I have a dog in the mouth.
Could be, could be. Could be. Are you sending it to me? See if I can get this to come up. I don't think we're gonna repair this pole. You can see it, this is the base. You know, turned it into a U. And that's going off, I think, the side over there. So they were actually, I don't know if I would dare say that they were lucky to hit the pole, but it may have slowed them down enough to keep
Kept
them
it
from
from
going
going.
further. And fortunately, I don't think they were, other than just being shaken, I think they were able to walk away. So that's a good thing. Moving on to UAMPS, they actually had our meetings over at the Hilton Garden by the Dixie Center, which is nice, so I didn't have to drive to Salt Lake this month. Can't say that many months. One of the presentations was done by Mason Baker, the CEO. He's been here a couple times. Just kind of demonstrating what's going on, and I talked about this a little bit last month with the solar and how it's impacting not only us, but the system in general. And so what's happening, this was, illustrative. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we created a duck, somebody came up with that term for it. Well, now they're start talking about a canyon curve, because during the day, because there's so much solar on the grid in general, you have to shut basically everything else off. And and then these ramp rates from here to here are so steep, it's a real challenge to do. And so like today, the power prices in these hours in the middle were like at 1/10 of a cent and 4/10 of a cent. So it shoves the prices way down when that happens, because there's such a overabundance of solar, and it's just getting worse because that's all anybody's building. So I just thought that was an interesting graphic to, maybe not in a good way interesting. Yeah, well, that's the challenge, is because the peak loads are increasing. And so what that does is you've got these resources that normally would have served the load over here, you have to shut off. You're still paying for them, but you still need them because the sun goes down and the load comes back.
That's why you need batteries with them, so that it softens that curve, that peak.
It helps. It will help raise this up a little because you're charging it. That's the idea in this valley, and then you're discharging it. Typically right now 4 hours, so it's going to help, but it's still.
It won't solve it.
But it is a way. And then this was another interesting graphic of the NERC, who's the National North American Energy Reliability Council, Electric Reliability Council, published this information that at least 50% of the U.S. has an elevated risk during peak load times for the grid being able to support it. Again, That's partly going back to just what we talked about. Different things happen. There's not a lot of stuff being built. And so things just keep getting stressed more and more. I guess the upper Great Lakes area was better than the previous year. It was in high risk there. And so there was just an elevated risk. So just interesting times. As far as UAMP's project, the Central St. George project, probably the main thing on that is there's been a couple right-of-way projects or issues we've had to deal with to accommodate development, and two of them have been completed. The one, they're both over in the Purgatory, or the Dennett's in the Purgatory area, and then the Sand Hollows on the access road that goes out to Sand Hollow from SR9. And so that was good to get those done. The BES exemption with WEC is moving very slowly, but that's part of the joint planning with the other 6 or 7, or the 7 utilities in the county. The Nebo project has been running well. The main thing there was from April 26th to yesterday, it had its spring maintenance period. They got through that. It's back online today and running well. And they say it's ready to go for this summer, so I hope so. Vail does well. The biggest challenge there is it's out of our control when Kern River compresses gas. So sometimes we have waste heat, sometimes we don't. And so when they're compressing gas, it runs fine. Sometimes they don't, and they've had their maintenance outages as well, so it shuts down the Vail plant. The solar projects, Steel 1A has achieved its commercial operation date. I think it was March 27th where they declared that. 1B, which is the one that we have the most output from, started to supply energy last week. And I'm guessing by the end of this month, they probably will achieve their official COD, commercial operation date. The Tonopah, the one on the Navajo reservation, runs really well and gives us power during those solar hours. I don't want to talk too much on the politics. The resource project is probably the biggest, or the next one that'll be coming up for us. It's a solar with battery. And at the UAMPS meetings next week, I suspect they'll have a term sheet that they'll have the board adopt or accept. And I don't know if it'll be next month or the following month. That'll probably come back to the power board and then to the council to move forward with that. We have about 7.5 megawatts, and about half of that is battery. The Uinta Wind project is a new one. I don't know much about that. To be quite honest, it doesn't have battery, and I'm not overly super interested in wind if it doesn't have some way to temper its really intermittent nature. But we'll see how that goes. We'll monitor it. If it makes sense, I'd be more likely to expand our participation if they expand Horse Butte that we're already in, as opposed to taking on another one. So we'll see. And then the natural gas project, that's going to be one of the major projects for us as well as UAMPS. We approved that they move forward with 2 sites, one in Idaho and one in Utah, to submit a generator interconnect application. That deadline, I think, was like May 15th or the end of this month. So it was pretty short timing. We had to get in that queue, if you will. And so we'll see how that all plays out. But those are resources that are like, those are targeted for 2030, 2031 to be online. So that's looking quite a ways out in the future. So it's a fun juggling act to try to do stuff now and predict the future.
Yeah, and hope that the political wind blows the right way as they're going through the approval process. Because it can
Yes.
change.
Yes, it can, and I'm sure it will. I think I covered most of my other notes here. The wind projects have been, they're about 32% capacity factors, so the wind blows about a third of the time. Is more or less what that says. I just can't tell you when. Unfortunately, it's usually blowing when it's stormy and it's cooler and our loads are down, and not blowing when it's warmer and our loads are up. So it's like an opposite thing for us. So that's basically my UANTS report. You got any other questions? And went over 6 o'clock. Sorry, but so look at that study. Send questions before, or we can, hopefully talk about it next month. But again, that would be my goal next month. Is in my mind, it's basically a final document. As long as you guys are comfortable with it, then all we do is have them take the draft off. So I've been through it multiple times and worked with them on different things.
Well, the good news, all the smart people have already looked at it.
I don't know about that.
Now you're just up to us.
Yeah, us to ask the dumb questions that you already know the answers to.
No, it's actually really good to get a perspective from people that aren't kind of buried in it day in and day out. You know what I mean? It gives like, oh, that's really
Makes
thought
us
about
wish
that.
that we would have looked at all those substations 5-6 years ago and just built them then
Probably
at the lower cost. Yeah.
much
yeah.
lower cost. So.
All right. Any questions, comments? Mark, Andy?
None here.
No, none here either.
Are there any other concerns or comments? If not, I'm just looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Hauser.
I'll second that.
Okay, was that Mark that made the motion?
Yes.
Mark motion, Dick seconded. So Andy, would you start us with a vote?
Yes, Palmer, aye.
Dick
Saunders, aye.
and Mark.
Hauser, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you. And we will meet next month on, June 4th. Okay, see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.